many countries has America invaded since the Second World War? America has been in 19 wars since World War II. The death toll from modern American wars killed in the name of freedom is over 20 million and counting. They have overthrown 36 governments, attempted to assassinate over 50 foreign leaders, and dropped bombs on people in over 30 countries. Syria was the latest of 14 countries in the Islamic world that US forces have invaded, occupied, or bombed. But you believe your American media when they say Putin is a crazy war-mongering dictator. Is your self-righteous indignation based on an understanding of basic history, or just triggered by the next new bandwagon that is trending on mainstream media? 90% of these deaths are ordinary men, women, and children. They started the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War. In the last 60 years or so, the list of countries the US invaded includes Bosnia, Cambodia, the Congo, Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Indonesia. There's been wars in Iraq, wars in Afghanistan, wars in Syria, Central America. They are the global bullies, destroying any country in the name of democracy and human rights. But the intention has always been to strip the nation of its resources and enrich their military-industrial complex. Now, what about Britain? Did you know that there are only 22 countries in the world that the UK have not invaded or helped in starting a war? The hypocrisy of the West is an abomination. Where was the sense of injustice when George Bush and Tony Blair invaded Iraq? Even after the UN weapons inspector Hans Blix visited Iraq and confirmed that there were no weapons of mass destruction. What a coincidence that Mr. Blix was found dead from suicide. Do any of you actually know Ukraine is not even a sovereign country? The state of Ukraine does not exist. If people just stopped and educated themselves before flinging themselves into a frenzy of indignant theatrics all over social media, they would discover that in 2014, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon stated that since December 1991, Ukraine has not registered its borders as an independent country. Ukraine is still under the territory of Russia, and everything that happens in this area is in fact an internal matter of Russia. And as far as Putin is concerned, there is no invasion. But now suddenly you're all Ukrainian. You all stand with George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and Marina Abramovich. Everyone is so used to instant news, like instant coffee and instant noodles or instant text messages, you don't have the patience to step back, to query the historical context of present-day events, to educate yourself on an intricate and complicated ancient conflict. So my question is, when everyone starts shouting on the rooftops that today they stand with Ukraine, do they realize that they're actually standing with Russia?
There's no doubt about it, we're living in times of catastrophic crisis where the lives of innocent civilians are sacrificed in the wars of their masters. Yes, in Ukraine, but not only. Since the last plenary, tens of thousands of Afghani citizens have been forced to flee in search of food and safety. 5 million children face famine, an agonising and painful death, a 500% increase in child marriages and children being sold just so they can survive, and not a mention of it, not here, not anywhere. No wall-to-wall TV coverage, no emergency humanitarian response, no special plenaries, not even a mention in this plenary, no Afghani delegations and no statements. My God, they must be wondering, what makes their humanitarian crisis so unimportant? Is it the colour of their skin? Is it that they're not white, they're not European, that their problems come from a US gun or a US invasion? Is it that the decision to rob their country's wealth was taken by a despotic US president rather than a Russian one? Because, my God, all wars are evil and all victims deserve support, and until we get on that page, we have no credibility whatsoever.
Now here's something you are not going to hear on the mainstream media. What you do hear is warmongers arguing that we must protect Ukraine because it is a quote-unquote democracy. But they're lying. Ukraine isn't actually a democracy. For example, to hold on to power, Ukraine's president shut down the 3 TV stations that were openly criticizing him and his policies, imprisoned the head of the opposition political party that had come in second place in their elections, and went and arrested and jailed that party's leaders. This is exactly what Putin has been accused of doing. But Ukraine did this all with the support of the United States.
This Ukraine crisis is really a mask-off moment, because you are seeing the implicit hypocrisy, how they have so much outrage, and the whole world is defending Ukraine, but they said nothing about Iraq and Syria and Libya and all of these countries which they destroyed. They want to support Ukrainians' right to resist. You know, if you want to take up armed resistance in Ukraine, that's totally fine, right? They're even going to go and crowdfund the weapons for you online, and they're even going to come and fight with you. But if you're a Palestinian, well, screw you. If you're an Iraqi or Syrian and you're resisting the Israeli occupation or the American occupation, you're a terrorist. They want sovereignty and respect sovereignty for Ukraine, and they respect its territorial integrity. What about Syria that gets bombed every week by Israel? What about Syria, the Golan Heights that are occupied by Israel? What about northern Syria, northeastern Syria occupied by the Americans? You set the Middle East on fire. Libya, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan. I can't count anymore, man. Millions of people turned to refugees. Millions of people killed, displaced. Look how they treat them. The people are saying we'll accept white refugees because they look like us. They're civilized. Oh, and Syrians and Iraqis and the people whose lives you destroyed, they're not civilized? They don't deserve to seek refuge? What kind of bullshit double standard is that? You got these racist hosts on TV talking about, well, it's okay, it's normal for war to be in Iraq or Afghanistan, and we'll take in the Ukrainian refugees because they look like us. They have blonde hair and blue eyes.
I'm sorry, it's really emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
When you look at what happened in the last refugee crisis in Europe back in 2015, Poland was one of the EU countries that was hesitant to take in refugees. Talk about what has changed and the different position now.
Well, just to put it bluntly, these are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. I mean, that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar to people who live in Poland.
On ne parle pas là de Syriens qui fuient des bombardements du régime syrien soutenu par Vladimir Poutine. On parle d'Européens qui partent à leurs voitures qui ressemblent à nos voitures.
Il y a une différence entre les Ukrainiens qui, encore une fois, participent de notre espace civilisationnel avec des populations qui appartiennent à d'autres civilisations.
On voit bien ce qu'ils fuient et il n'est pas question de dire est-ce que vous êtes vraiment des réfugiés. On est au XXIe siècle, on est dans une ville européenne et on a des tirs de missiles de croisière comme si on était en Irak ou en Afghanistan, vous imaginez.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country. We are not intimidated by those who hurl insults and abuse at small business workers and steal food from the homeless. We won't give in to those who fly racist flags. We won't cave to those who engage in vandalism or dishonor the memory of our veterans. So to those responsible for this behavior, it needs to stop. There's a level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about, of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted, that I find quite interesting.
Regardless of the fact that we are attacking your fundamental rights or limiting your fundamental rights, and the Charter says that's wrong, we're still going to go ahead and do it.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
We went after the funding. Our efforts, combined with the city's efforts, eliminated the GoFundMe. $10 million are no longer accessible to the demonstrators. There are other funding avenues that we continue to aggressively go after through intelligence, information, coordination with financial institutions, and all three levels of government.
We are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use.
We will be relentless in pursuing the funding that has enabled this demonstration to continue to this point.
These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies.
I want to be very clear. The scope of these measures will be time-limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are meant to address. The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country. This is about keeping Canadians safe, protecting people's jobs, and restoring confidence in our institutions.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Justin Trudeau, I mean, I thought he was kind of a cool guy. And I started to read what he said. This is a couple of weeks ago. He was, or maybe this is September, but he was talking about people who are not vaccinated. He said they don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic, often racist. No, they're not.
That was not smart of him at all.
Right. He said, but they take up space. And with that, we have to make a choice in terms of a leader as a country. Do we tolerate these people? It's like, tolerate these? Now you do sound like him.
Canada and our allies will defend democracy. We are taking these actions today to stand against authoritarianism. The people of Ukraine, like all people, must be free to determine their own future. We will continue working with our international partners to safeguard Ukraine's territorial integrity and prevent further Russian aggression.